What would Martin Luther King say if he saw Colin Kaepernick kneeling while the whole world rose up to beat him down? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever taken a second to imagine what it would be like to look at that scene through the eyes of someone who spent their life trying to make this country see the value of a black life? I know what you feel. Because what happened to Colin, what was done to him, isn't just one isolated event, it's a symptom. It's the fever of a disease that refuses to die. And if you think this is all in the past, that it's old news, it's probably because you've never felt the cold sting of being despised just for existing. When Colin Kaepernick knelt, he wasn't silent. He was screaming, but not with his mouth. He screamed with his body, with his choice, with courage. He knew exactly what he could lose. It wasn't a distraction, it wasn't an impulse, it was a decision. And still, you saw what happened, didn't you? He became a problem. He was a nuisance. He messed with what shouldn't be touched. He questioned the pride of a nation built on a promise that was never kept. Colin knelt to say that we can't keep singing an anthem that celebrates freedom while black men die with another man's knee on their neck. And that, for many, was too much. Martin Luther King, looking at this scene, would say that this gesture isn't an attack, it's a plea. He'd say that peaceful protest should never be confused with disrespect. That silencing a voice just because it's uncomfortable is exactly what keeps oppression standing. Do you think it was a coincidence that he was never hired by any team again? Do you really believe that he, with the talent he had, suddenly became dispensable? No coach, no manager saw any value in someone who took the 49ers to the Super Bowl. Martin Luther King would see it clearly. This was punishment, retaliation, a way to say to everyone else, be careful, stay in your place, don't get involved, play, smile, and shut your mouth. But don't you find it strange how the world reacts to the silence of a black man? Because when he speaks, they say he's playing the victim. When he's silent, they say he's a threat. When he screams, they say he's being disrespectful. When he prays, they say it's marketing. And when he kneels, they say he's a traitor. Martin Luther King would see something familiar in Colin. He would understand the weight of being misunderstood, hated, discarded, for daring to speak an uncomfortable truth. He would remember the sermons he gave in churches where no one wanted to hear about equality. He would remember the letters he wrote in cells, accused of being an extremist. He would remember the day he was called an enemy of the state for wanting black children to be able to play in the same park as white children. And he would look you in the eye in the middle of this scene and ask, why is this still necessary? Why in the 21st century does a black man have to lose everything to make others see something so obvious? It wasn't just Colin who knelt that day. It was an entire people being dragged to the ground once again. And yet, he stood tall in dignity. Even on the ground, he stood tall. You know what Martin Luther King would also say? That the true test of character isn't what you do when everything is calm, but what you do when the whole world is pointing its finger at you. When all paths are closed, and you still choose what is right. Colin chose. He chose to lose contracts. He chose to face the media. He chose to endure the contempt, and you think he did it for fame? Fame for what? For being hated by his own country. He did it because there was too much blood on the asphalt, because there were too many tears in the police stations, because there were too many mothers burying their sons, and no one did anything. No one said anything. And you still wonder if it was worth it. If it went too far, Martin Luther King wouldn't ask that. He would ask why so many are still silent. Why so many still think that peace comes from omission, not from justice. Do you know what it's like to pay the price for having a conscience? Have you ever felt the world turn its back on you for simply no longer accepting silence? Colin knows, and Martin Luther King knew it too. Both understood in different times that there are things that cannot be negotiated. Dignity, life, freedom, the right to breathe, the right to say, I am here and I matter. But it seems that when a black man says that, the world hears it as if it were a threat, as if it were arrogance, as if it were an exaggeration. Martin Luther King saw this happen with Malcolm, with Medgar, with so many others. He saw it with himself too. And he would see it again, in 2016, when Colin did what so many didn't have the courage to do. What would you do in his place? Would you have the courage to kneel, knowing that you were going to lose everything? Would you have the courage not to get up again, even with the whole world screaming against you? Martin Luther King would ask that, looking into your eyes, because he knew that silence protects the oppressor, not the oppressed. And you know that too, you know, and that's why you're here, because something in you understood, felt, hurt. So, don't forget what Colin did. Don't reduce it to a protest. It was more than that. It was a choice. It was an act of faith, faith that there is still someone listening, faith that even when everything seems lost, someone will still rise up, even if it's by kneeling first. And maybe that person is you. Do you understand what it means to have to justify your existence every day? To have to measure your words so you don't seem aggressive? To have to smile so you don't seem suspicious? To have to lower your eyes so you don't seem defiant? To have to swallow injustice because any reaction of yours can cost you your freedom or your life? Colin didn't ask for privileges. He didn't demand special treatment. He asked for justice, that's all. He asked that people stop dying just for being black. He asked that the police be held accountable. He asked that the pain of his people no longer be ignored as if it were noise, as if it were a nuisance. He asked that America see its children as humans, not as threats. And look what they did to him. Martin Luther King Jr. wouldn't be surprised, not because this is normal, but because this repeats itself. It always repeats itself. When a black person dares to step out of the line that the system has drawn, the answer comes, go back to your place. The problem is that this place is always the ground. Martin Luther King Jr. would know, because he was also pushed to that ground. They called him an agitator, an enemy, a radical. They tried to kill his reputation before killing his body. And now with Colin, it was the same. First they demoralize, then they isolate, then they forget. But there's something they never understand. Those who act driven by conscience don't need the approval of the world. They need the courage to continue even without it. And courage is what is most lacking today. You feel that too, don't you? Don't. That we are surrounded by empty speeches, by rehearsed gestures, by promises that never come off the surface. That while the media screams, the bodies keep falling. That while the tone of the protest is debated, no one wants to face the real reason for it. Martin Luther King Jr. said that the greatest obstacle to freedom was not the declared hatred, but the indifference disguised as neutrality. The silence of those who say, "It's not my problem." The comfort of those who think that time will solve it. But time doesn't solve anything by itself. Those who solve it are action, the choice, the confrontation with the truth. Colin Kaepernick chose. And what he faced is what happens every time someone tears the veil of convenience. Because it's much easier to think that racism is an exaggeration than to accept that it is structural. It's more comfortable to call it whining than to recognize that you live in a system that feeds on inequality. And you know that. Deep down, you know. You know what it's like to hear that you need to do twice as much to get half. You know what it's like not to be heard, even when screaming. You know what it's like to carry the weight of centuries on your back and still be accused of laziness. You know. Martin Luther King Jr. also knew, and that's why he wouldn't ask you to remain silent. He would ask you to remain human. Even when everything around you dehumanizes you. That you keep your head up, even when the world tries to bend your soul. Do you remember the knee on George Floyd's neck? Do you remember his question? "I can't breathe." That phrase echoes to this day. Not only in the protests, but inside every black body that tries to live in a world that insists on suffocating. Colin knelt before that. He knelt before the explosion. He knelt when there was still time to listen, but no one wanted to listen. And now? Now they say he was right, that he foresaw everything. But where was everyone when he needed it most? Where were they when he was erased from the league? When doors were closed, when he was treated as a threat? Martin Luther King Jr. would have extended his hand. He would have told Colin that the men who change the world are not those who please, but those who disturb. That true peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. That you cannot call peace what only silences the oppressed. Are you understanding this? Are you listening with your heart? Because this fight is not of one man alone. It's not about a football field. It's not about an anthem. It's about every time a black person needs to choose between their conscience and their survival, between what is right and what is safe, between dignity and employment. And why is this still a choice? Why do we still have to prove that our pain is real? Martin Luther King Jr. would speak with anger, but not with hatred. Because he knew that hatred is the poison of the oppressor, he would speak with truth, with love for justice, with hope that there is still someone listening, there is still someone feeling. You feel it, don't you? You see that this is not just history. It's now, it's every day, it's you too, it's your son, your sister, your neighbor, your people, our people. And if you feel that, then you understand what Colin tried to say. Not with speeches, with a gesture, with a kneeling body, but a standing soul. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." And Colin's life didn't end, but his career was buried because he refused to be silent. He didn't lower his head, he lowered his body. And that was too much for a country that wants obedient blacks, but not conscious ones. Can you imagine the weight of that? Colin knew there was no turning back, that act could be the end. And even so, he knelt. That's not ordinary courage. That's the courage of someone who carries centuries of pain. The courage of someone who understood that there is something more important than contracts and applause. Dignity. And you? What would you do in his place? Because Martin Luther King Jr. would ask you that, not to judge you, but to remind you that change doesn't come from the top. It comes from gestures, it comes from the base, it comes from the people, it comes from you. When you watch someone lose everything for an act of conscience and still question the validity of that gesture, you are not on the side of justice. You are on the side of oppression, even without wanting to, even in silence. Martin Luther King Jr. would see in this the great tragedy, not the declared hatred of the bad, but the frightening silence of the good. And you are not bad. But are you being good enough? Are you willing to lose comfort to defend those who don't have the minimum? Are you prepared to listen more than to speak? Are you ready to act even when no one applauds? Martin Luther King Jr. believed in you. He believed that, even in the face of fear, doubt, fatigue, there is in every human being a spark of justice, a desire for righteousness, a hunger for truth, and it is with that spark that you transform the world. But it needs to be fed, it needs your choice, it needs your courage, it needs your gesture, even if it is misunderstood, even if it costs you, even if it leaves you alone. Because that's how it was with Colin, that's how it was with King. Will it be like that with you? They can silence you. They can push you to the corner. They can erase your name. But they will never be able to bury the truth. They will never silence an awakened conscience. They will never suffocate a heart that has already understood what matters, and you already understood. It's not about fame, it's not about prestige, it's about no longer accepting death disguised as normality. It's about not agreeing with the lie that everything is fine, when ours are dying for nothing. It's about kneeling when the world tells you to stand up. It's about choosing dignity, even if it costs everything. Colin did that. Martin Luther King Jr. too. And now it's up to you. Have you ever noticed how silence disguises itself as peace? How the absence of confrontation is sold as balance? But it's not. You know that. When a black man needs to kneel to be heard, it's not because he gave up. It's because he's already screamed too much, and no one listened. And when even then they still try to silence him, it's because what he carries is disturbing. You carry that too. You carry the memory. You carry the names. Those who became statistics. Those who didn't come back. Those who disappeared. Those who were forgotten. But the most serious thing is that you carry the feeling that all of this can still happen again. With you. With someone yours. With anyone who has the skin that the world still insists on treating as a threat. Martin Luther King Jr. would look at you now and ask, how long will you tolerate the intolerable? How long will you wait for someone to take action in your place? How long will you accept that violence against yours is relativized? Racism isn't just when someone insults you. It's when they exclude you from the debate. It's when they give you a dirty look, when they distrust your presence. When they choose another name, even if your resume is better. When you enter a store and need to prove that you are not going to steal anything. When you see your people being treated as a problem and not as part of the solution. All of this hurts, corrodes. It takes small pieces. It slowly erases. And you know that. You feel that. That's why Colin Kaepernick wasn't just a player. He was a mirror. And many people hated what they saw reflected. Because when someone kneels for justice, it forces everyone around to choose a side. You can't be neutral in the face of truth. You can't pretend you didn't see it. And you saw it. You saw when he was ignored, when they tried to distort everything, when they said he was offending the country, when, in fact, he was begging this country to be worthy of the flag it carries. And yet he was treated as an enemy. Martin Luther King Jr. never said it would be easy. He said that every real change requires tension, requires discomfort, requires sacrifice, but it requires above all positioning. Are you ready for that? It's not about whether you agree with the gesture. It's about whether you see the pain that motivated it. It's about whether you're willing to acknowledge that this pain exists, that it's real, that it's still alive. Do you have any idea what it means to resist every single day, to have to fight to be seen as human, to have to explain the obvious, ask for the bare minimum, beg for the right to exist without fear? Martin Luther King Jr. would look you in the eye and tell you it's past time to stop waiting for permission, because freedom isn't asked for. It's built with courage, with awareness, with action. You might think you don't have enough of a voice, but you have a presence. You have a choice. You have influence over those around you. And every time you stay silent in the face of an attack, an injustice, an exclusion, you reinforce the idea that it's acceptable, that black dignity is negotiable, that black pain is invisible. And it's not. You felt it yourself. You've had to take a deep breath when you wanted to scream. You've smiled when you wanted to cry. You've heard disguised jokes. You've experienced that awkwardness that only you noticed. You've pretended it didn't hurt, but it did. Martin Luther King Jr. would call that silent violence, the kind that doesn't explode on the news, but crushes you from the inside, the kind that builds up until you doubt yourself, until you start to wonder if it's worth fighting. But it is, because there are still people kneeling. There are still people saying enough. There are still people who refuse to accept that black life is disposable. You are those people. Don't let fear paralyze you. Don't let apathy swallow you. Don't let them tell you it's not your role, because it is. The world you want starts with how you react to what you see, and you've seen it, you know. So choose. Either you're just another bystander, or you're one who stands up, even while kneeling. If this touched some part of you that was dormant, comment now, "I needed to hear this." And if you know someone who still thinks this is all an exaggeration, share it with that person. They need it more than you imagine.